Hello, everybody. Maybe you've seen me at a JavaScript The Hard Parts or something like that, or on YouTube, but my name is Kyle Combs. I am the Senior Software Engineer here at Codesmith. I've been with Codesmith since January of 2019, so coming up on 4 years now. I was a lead instructor in the New York Onsite program, and I was also a lead instructor in the New York program when we went remote. And then I was the lead instructor for the Central Remote program as well. So I've worked in kind of programs on-site and remote, just like a lot of these panelists that we have tonight. We've got a couple of panelists that did the program in person back before the pandemic, and one panelist this evening that did the program remote. Now that we have two options, we want to kind of like get down to the nitty-gritty about what's great and what's good about each of those kind of programs. So before we kick off, I would love to have the panelists introduce themselves as well. I think we'll just try and go in like a general order, starting from intros all the way through. We'll start with Annette, and then Katrina, and then Duane, as we go through all of the different questions tonight. So Annette, would you like to just introduce yourself? Tell us like who you are, where you are, maybe when you did the program, and what you've been doing since then.
Sure. Hey, everyone. I'm Annette. I did the on-site program 2019, so it's been a couple of years now. I am now at IBM as a backend engineer. I've been there for a couple of years, working on a lot of internal apps and doing a lot of essentially profile building for employees. That's kind of what our squad handles.
Right on. Welcome. We're happy to have you, Annette. Katrina, how about you?
Hello, I am Katrina, and I went to Codesmith almost exactly a year ago. So coming up on my 1-year anniversary. I did the Los Angeles remote program. And right now I am employed. I've been employed for about 2 months at a consulting company called Def Method. And currently I'm actually working in Ruby and learning some new stuff. So that's pretty fun. Got assigned to a project using a language that I had been tinkering with. So it's fun. I'm enjoying doing something a little bit different.
That's awesome. We're happy to have you as well, Katrina. Duane, over to you, man.
Hi, I'm Duane. I went to Codesmith in July 2019. I'm on my second job since Codesmith, working primarily on the front end, React front end, but I've been doing a lot of backend stuff as well. It's a Node backend. My company is a DB01. It's a fintech company based in New York City. But it's pretty remote. Yeah, doing some cool stuff. We have a serverless backend, so we're using GCP as our cloud provider, and yeah, I'm learning a whole lot, and I've been there for about a year now.
Awesome. Well, welcome as well, and welcome to all of our panelists. Well, let's jump into. I have some questions that I want to kind of ask and kind of go through with all the panelists, and then if you have a question, think of that question. We are going to save some time for y'all to ask some questions as well as we get towards the end. So if you have one, don't worry, we'll get to you shortly, and then we'll ask for those questions, and you can just pop up your hand, and we'll go around at that way. But to get it kicked off, I know that none of you, when you came to the program, really had an option, whether you did it in person or remote. It was kind of one or the other at that point. But I would love to know, like, what do you think were some of the benefits of doing the program in the setting that you did it in? So Annette, we'll start off with you.
Yeah, for me, I mean, obviously I didn't have the option of doing it remote, but I feel like that worked out for me just because I knew going in the community was going to be a huge part of it for me. So doing a lot of the workshops before I even applied to Codesmith, kind of figuring out what the general vibe of the program was, like really convinced me to, go for it. And I was like, personally, my learning style is I also need people to like push my ass to actually learn it versus being a lot more self-motivating. So that was also a factor in terms of like, okay, now I have a lot more drive to actually get it done. But again, there's always cons and pros to both.
Awesome. Katrina, how about you?
So, seeing as I attended the LA residency, gotta say, really enjoyed not having to go there. Really enjoyed not having to deal with LA traffic. I'm sure New York is the same or worse. So that was one of the perks for me. I feel like that allowed me to get a little more sleep and not have to drive, which has taken my stress level like dramatically down. But I do think that my cousin actually attended the Los Angeles in-person immersive, and we kind of were able to compare and contrast our experiences. I think that, like Annette said, you get a lot more hands-on community when you do attend the in-person program. However, to the credit of the Codesmith team here in LA, I felt like it really did an awesome job of establishing and like continuing to engender this really supportive, engaged community. We were obligated to play fun games with each other like once a week or whatever. And it was great. And I feel like I came out of it with friends, despite never having met any of them at the start. And even only having seen some of them a few times, we still keep in touch. So I think that the quality of the classes is really good. And there's the challenge of being in your house and having to like pay attention in your house when you have literally all the things you want to do right there. But for me personally, it worked out. Yeah.
Awesome. Right on. How about you, Duane?
Yeah. Again, I attended the in-person cohort, and similar to Annette, I needed the in-person community type of vibe, just because I needed that push. I definitely, when someone is staying late, like when you see someone staying late, it's like, okay, let me put in the extra hours, and because it's so tempting to, I'm gonna call it a day, but then when you see your friends and your peers grinding, it just inspires you to grind some more. And it definitely, I mean, I'm sure the remote course has its benefits, because I love working remote, but for me personally, I need it to be in person.
Nice. Right on. Well, taking the, which program you kind of did into account, how did the daily schedule fit into your life and responsibilities that you had, outside of the program as well? And did you have any downtime during the day? If so, like how did taking the program in person versus remotely kind of like affect what you did with that downtime, or kind of like these different kinds of aspects? Annette, you want to kick us off?
I think for me, it definitely became just pretty much a center of what I was doing for the next 3 months, because being on site, you literally are there up to like 12, 13 hours a day. And even when you have a little bit of downtime during the program, it's like you're still very much immersed in that environment, whether it's, through doing team lunches, dinners. So 24/7, you're basically around the same people. So you don't really get a break in terms of like mentally detaching yourself from Codesmith, but that's also kind of the point where they want you to get the most out of that, the program. But I will say there is not as much flexibility, maybe in comparison to doing a remote program where, I could probably duck out for a little bit of time just to, run an errand, whatever. Like I didn't have the option when I was doing the in-person. So more stringent in terms of, okay, I have to commit myself to the program, but the benefit of that is, again, you're with so many of the same people, and that kind of adds to the general, advantage of being there.
Nice. Right on. How about you, Katrina?
I was trying to panically look up my schedule from Codesmith because I just don't remember precisely, but I believe I know on Mondays we had family dinners, so you don't get that dinner hour to yourself. You have family dinner, and it was not like, it was mandatory, as in like you'd have to excuse yourself if you weren't going to be present. And so there were an hour pause, I believe, for lunch, and an hour pause, I believe, for dinner, if I remember correctly. Which I guess the perk of that is that you're already at your house. So like I would take my hour and I'd like go breathe like air, like outside air, like maybe like walk my dog, like do an activity or something, you know, kind of break from it. Though I will say, like the days, the hours per day that you spend working on code is going to be about the same as in person. The difference will probably be like getting there and getting back. I did end up, usually it was like 8 a.m. to like 8, 9, 10 p.m. days. So it can get pretty long, but yeah, I think having those hours breaking it up is nice. And there is like a little bit, definitely more flexibility since you're already at your house. But I kind of like fell into a little rhythm where I'd like sit down 5 minutes early and do my Wordle and then, you know, and then get through my day. But yeah.
Awesome. Right on. Duane, how about you?
Yeah, if I remember correctly, I think Tuesdays and Thursdays, the lunch was 2 hours long, or I think so. But yeah, you know, the flexibility. I was coming from Queens, so I really couldn't just like you know, go home for lunch or come back. I was once once I was there the entire day. You know, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 hours. But it was yeah, I found that my cohort mates, you know, your group project mates, we did find a balance of like breaking up the day so you don't get burnt out. I mean, there was ping pong, you're in the city, so you go for a walk, or you know, go get lunch together, or just do your own thing. So while you're in there in that space for so long, we did a good job of like always maintaining that balance and like, you know, recharging and you know, making sure that mentally you're okay.
Nice. Right on. Well, the second question, I guess, kind of like follows up on that, on the last question, and you know, more kind of like when you did get that little bit of time outside of the program, whether it was like once you left Codesmith to head home for the night, or if you were at home, like once you finally just like, okay, I'm closing the computer, that's it. What was kind of your time outside of the program like? You know, how did you kind of like utilize that time? And do you think taking the program in person or remotely kind of influenced your life outside of that?
And for me, I feel like I had to be a little bit more precise with how I spent like my personal time outside of the program. So making sure that if I wanted to go to the gym, I really have to be like, you know, super disciplined and like either wake up early, go, or then, you know, if I don't feel like it's too late, I'll go after the day is done. But with like spending time with friends too, that's also a little bit more not tough, but you definitely have to kind of, you know, pick and choose where you want to go depending on like what your friends want to do, because you don't necessarily have the same flexibility like, oh, you can just, you know, hang out at somebody's house at like 6 p.m. But it wasn't as bad as I thought it initially would be. So there's still a lot of, you know, good downtime that you get to have, you know, after you're done with your day. You can still relax, and your weekends are still as free as possible. So you definitely still have the choice to kind of maintain a good balance between like doing the program and also just enjoying, you know, your own personal time, for sure.
Right on. Katrina?
Yeah, I pretty much agree with Annette. I think having to be a little more structured with your free time and then figuring out what your priorities are. Like there's some things you just have to do. Like you have to eat, the dog has to go out. Like you have to find time to take care of yourself and take care of, you know, any other, because some people have like whole other people that they have to take care of too while going through Codesmith, and it is pretty demanding. I personally well, I had just moved to LA when I came out here. So I was like, no friends, no problem. I'll just like not talk to anyone and it won't be an issue. But I did like, there were some like Codesmith meetups, and I did like force, breathe outside air, like I mentioned, to try and just like keep that mental health okay. But I do think that I personally am someone who struggles to change activities. I'm really good once I'm like in the zone of an activity. I don't want to break it and then get in the zone of another, because like I have like a transition time or whatever. So I feel like once I was like, all right, the day is done, then I was able to like have more structured activities and like do completely disconnect. But I think during my pauses during the day, I wasn't really able to. So it just kind of made me see what my priorities were, I suppose. But I'm fortunate that like I moved here to be close to my mom, so I didn't starve. Like there were all kinds of good things. But there's definitely ways. It takes up a lot of time and it's very, very demanding. But there's also time that you just have to. There's time for yourself, but you have to use it wisely, I guess. Yeah.
Nice. Right on. Gotta love having somebody to cook you meals while you're going to Codesmith. That's a clutch move right there. Duane, how about you, man?
Yeah, it was. I would say the first half was easier because I have a daughter and she was 9 at the time. So, but it was summer. It was summer for her, so it was some summer vacation. So I think like the first 6 weeks was summer, but then when school started for her, that kind of got a little trickier, trying to, help with homework for her, or, help study, like trying to juggle parental duties, like school parental duties and Codesmith. So that really because I remember we had classes on Saturdays up until 5 or 4. So then, after, I would go home and help her with her, school projects or book reports or whatever have you. And Sundays, definitely all day. So that was the last 4 or 5 weeks, especially with the production project and then my daughter in school. It was a little bit dicey, but yeah, definitely you do have time to Saturdays you could be decompress. And typically the class on Saturdays is not, I don't believe there's a lecture. I think it was just I can't remember what it was, but it was a little bit more relaxed. And Sundays, yeah, Sundays you take it that time to sleep or recharge or whatever have you.
That one day a week that you sleep, right?
Yeah.
Nice. All right. So Katrina kind of already touched on this question a little bit in her intro, but I'm curious, like, what your experience was kind of like meeting both with your cohort or maybe other alumni while you were in the program, whether it was remote or kind of in person. Like, for example, some folks mentioned team dinners or lunches together and whatnot. Like, how did you collaborate and kind of build those friendships and relationships with the folks that you were in the cohort with in the setting that you were in?
Because we essentially had 2 cohorts in the same space. So that was really, really helpful with if we were stuck on a problem, whatever you wanted somebody to bounce ideas off of. Like there were so many people I could go to just to like get advice, kind of debug things together if we needed to. And those seniors already have a really good grasp on like what we would expect going down with the program. So they would be essentially kind of additional mentor figures for us. And that was really great for just learning a lot quicker and also just getting good exposure to like, okay, how do we handle projects, managing them? On the social aspect, it was great to meet so many people from different backgrounds. And beyond that, like every Thursday night, we had those like workshops where people would just hang out afterwards. So that was another chance for us to like decompress, but also get involved with kind of helping around the community and also just meeting people that are interested in Codesmith or were looking to either apply to the program. So that was great. We had a lot of chances to just like meet really interesting people.
Nice. Right on. Katrina?
So I do think that one of probably the downsides of being remote is that you don't get a lot of like, as I think in person, you just can't, you're not going to have the same connections that you'll have with people like when you're talking on Zoom. However, that said, I do think that if you're talking on Zoom 40 hours a week with people, you do kind of get to know them. And we had like talent shows and like, or just like hangouts after hours where people would attend, and you get to kind of be a little bit more candid and actually get to know people, which did eventually evolve into, having a cohort meetup where we'd pick a bar and like try and like find a spot that's somewhere between everyone. Because I guess that's another thing with a remote program, which I don't know to what degree like the Venn diagram crosses between remote and in person, but we're very, very scattered. There are even people in Seattle taking the LA remote program, or on the East Coast taking the LA remote program because that worked better with their schedules or what have you. And so when we did meet up, there's always like that, okay, how are we going to organize this? And a certain degree of organization that was a little bit more demanding. But yeah, I did, still had the opportunity to meet some really lovely people. And it's kind of fun to guess how tall people are via video. And I nailed it a couple times, and then decided to stop there, because when you get 3 right in a row, you're going to stop. But there's fun little things like that, I guess, that are kind of quirky and enjoyable. But I still probably would have enjoyed the really amazing community that I got to be a part of in my cohort even more had we more occasions to actually spend time in this breathing the same air. I'm just going to talk about breathing air this entire time, apparently. But okay, I'm good.
I'll chime in. I think that has two of the things that you said. I think one of the things that surprised me most when we went remote is how these kind of bonds would still just continue to thrive in like such a remote setting. And then many of the cohorts would organize trips to either LA or New York or something like that at the end so they could all meet in person. And I've had the opportunity to go to quite a few of those, and it is always amazing how different everyone looks when you see them in person. It's just like some people are like 6'8" and you thought they were like 5'10", or they're 5 foot tall and you thought they were like 6 foot. The height thing is a very interesting thing. Duane.
Yeah, I would say, even after Codesmith, we still use that Slack channel, the Codesmith NYC 13, and then my production project mates, we have our own Slack channel. And frankly, I work with one of my teammates from the production project today, so we still keep in touch, obviously. But yeah, I mean, I was just doing some leak code with one of my cohort mates like a couple of weeks ago. So, we definitely keep in touch. Definitely, it was, I think our cohort, there was lots of, different backgrounds and different personalities, but like we were all cool. There was no drama, no issues. Everyone's friendly. I have almost all their phone numbers. We still keep in contact. We organize, some meetups, a couple of drinks, whatever have you. So yeah, it was definitely lifelong friendships.
I love hearing that. Who are you working with now?
I'm working with Michelle Herrera.
Nice. Well, tell her I said hello, please.
I will. She's a rock star, man. She's killing it. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, okay. So let's talk about kind of like after the program now, right? You've all moved on. You're working, some for years, some for months, but with what you're doing now, how did the program kind of like help you prepare for the specific position that you're doing now?
I think not so much in terms of, because I got really into doing backend work pretty quickly. And the majority of, at least my time at Codesmith, was working on a lot of like UI work and front end tasks. So the one thing that, beyond having the flexibility to do like full stack stuff when needed, What it really prepared me for was kind of learning how to just kind of figure it out along the way, whether by through looking at documentation and just breaking things like as you work on it. And kind of just following the Codesmith model of like, okay, take your time, go step by step, and you're going to get frustrated along the way, definitely, but sooner or later you kind of figure your way out into, okay, how do I approach this problem and what's the best way to tackle it? And I feel like that goes a long way, especially when you first start, because it's super easy still to feel like you don't really know anything. And to be fair, like I feel like all of us feel that way a lot of times. But kind of taking a step back and realizing that, okay, let's just, take a breath and, do the best that we can. And I feel like Hilton really prepares you for that in terms of being a lot more independent and trying to kind of think like a much more like seasoned engineer on the team.
Nice. I like that. Katrina.
So I've only been, like I said, I've been at my current position for about 2 months here. And I will say that I think technical communication during the interview was something that I was one of they actually gave me like what you did well in the interview and what you could improve on. And that was one of the things that was very positive that I got back. And I think that's something where you're pairing with people, you're constantly technically communicating, you're getting called out in a very nice way to kind of make sure that you have this really precise, accurate technical communication. And I think for interviews, that's really helpful. And so far in my job, I do think, I mean, I've actually been mostly pairing. I initially, because I work at it's a consulting agency, so there's a set, like you'll get set on a project for X amount of time, and then you'll move on to something else that may or may not be using the same tech stack, which is, look at me working in Ruby. And I was JavaScript, TypeScript, React. And now I'm like, all right, let's go like Ruby View. Let's see what happens. But the way I got assigned to the project was while you're sitting on the bench waiting to be assigned to a project, there was another colleague who's like, do you want to pair on this personal project? It's in Ruby. I'm like, oh, I'm learning that. And I ended up blah, blah, getting set on this project. And I think having that curiosity and then also like autonomy, I feel like Codesmith was really good at teaching you how to learn, teaching you how to find the right places to look for information, how to Google your error codes properly, how to get what you're looking for and kind of work to a solution. I feel like that has been really beneficial, especially like, being on a project where I have to learn all this new material, new syntax, all that different structures. I feel like I'm like, okay, I've done this before. Like I could do this again, and I'm really enjoying it. So I feel like Codesmith really prepared me for working on a team, especially in pairing, like a pairing paradigm, I guess. And then also just having the tool set to figure out solutions to different problems, or figure out what you need to learn in order to have the capacity to solve a problem or to create whatever feature or what have you.
Nice. Right on. Duane?
Yeah, definitely technical communication for sure. Helped they're great with interviews. Also, there was one just like not being afraid to do things that you've never done. Because when I got to this role, yeah, I've done React, I've done Node, but we're using all types of tech. I mean, one repository is in Scala. I've never touched Scala before. We're using we're using GCP. I've never used GCP before. We're using Terraform. I've never used that before, but that being able to like break it down to the smallest possible problem first, and then just solve that problem and solve these small problems, and then or even the way that we used to ask questions in Slack at Codesmith. There was a specific way that we had to ask, where we had to, I think it was what the problem is, what you expect to happen, what you tried, and what you think the issue might be. And I've used that same concept today, even even these days. And oftentimes I find the answer before I even have to ask for help. So yeah, I mean, just having confidence. And again, the imposter syndrome is gonna always, you're always gonna have doubt, whatever, but like not being afraid to like do something for the first time. I think that's definitely what I learned from Codesmith, for sure.
Nice. I like that. And it's cool to see that, a lot of you are working in things that you didn't even learn at Codesmith, but you kind of like, it sounds like you use that kind of experience of like, well, I learned all that stuff in a short amount of time. I guess I can learn these other things. I like that.
Yeah.
So maybe you had a choice in this, maybe you didn't when you were looking for jobs, but when you went out looking for jobs, did the program that you take kind of like affect whether you were looking for an in-person role or whether you looked for a remote role?
When I first started job searching, I wanted something in person, but I was also open to the idea of doing maybe not fully in person all the time, like a couple of days in the office, and then I can work from home. Like that would be great too, because I feel like I wanted to be in an environment where you had the option to also kind of work together in person, whether it's through pairing, or you had just like your team available to you if you wanted to like, storm on something, test something out really quickly. So I wanted to do that, especially as like just starting out. Then I feel like that's very important to kind of your growth, because there are certain things that you just can't learn doing it by yourself versus just having a team along with you. And I wanted that as an experience starting out. So I feel like that really influenced like, which roles that I was willing to go for and which companies that I wanted to interview with.
Nice. Right on. Katrina, what about you?
I was willing to consider hybrid roles. I mostly wanted to work from home. That was kind of one of my big objectives. Actually, though I did like the idea of like having the option of going into work a couple days a week or being, that would have been fine with me. But ultimately, that didn't happen. And I think that, again, where I live, I would have to drive like 30, 40 minutes to get anywhere. I just don't want to do that. So like I don't like driving. It's a theme in my life. I don't mind it. I just don't like having to. But in any case, it really did influence my job search in the sense that if it was there was like one interview where they're like, yeah, you just have to drive here. It's like an hour away, like 3 times a week. And I was like, yeah. If this is my only option, I'll consider. I didn't say that to them, but it was definitely something that I considered heavily, also because I might move. And so I really wanted to have the option of like having that flexibility of being able to, go somewhere else. Like I can go visit some family and work during the week and hang out with them on weekends if I want to, or things like that. So I did definitely look for remote first roles. And that's what I got, which works out for me.
All right. Awesome. Duane?
Well, when I was interviewing, so I graduated the program in October 2019. I had a couple of interviews before the pandemic, which I was perfectly fine working in person. I mean, this was right before the pandemic, but then after, it was like working in person wasn't an option at that point. It was all remote. And if I had a choice, I guess I would have wanted my first job to be in person, because just to have someone that you could physically bounce ideas off of, you could pairing like in person as opposed to like on a Zoom call or whatever have you. I just felt that would have been easier. But I do think that, there was benefits having my first job remote, because I was kind of forced to like, it was like a trial by fire type of thing. It was like I had to figure things out quickly, not on my own, but kind of on my own. So, pros and cons. But now, yes, now I don't ever want to go back into the office. I haven't been into the office since March 2020, and I don't anticipate ever being at a job that I have to go in. If it's optional, yeah, sure, I may once in a while, but I fully embrace the remote culture.
Nice.
I will add on to Duane's point that like with being remote, because we're remote right now too, that if you were to kind of set up a meeting with somebody, like you really have to be cognizant of like what you're spending that time on. So making sure that you ask the right questions and making sure that you don't kind of delay the meeting if it's like not needed, versus if you're in person and it's like, okay, you can continue chatting for like however long, right? So you're a little more like as a little bit more carefree with how you spend your time versus remote. You have to be like, okay, I want to be respectful of this person's time too.
Awesome. Yeah, I like that. And Katrina, I lived in Los Angeles for a couple of years, and I used to always say to my partner, I was like, how do people that have to commute live in this city? Because I will never ever understand. I want to make sure that we have some time to take some questions from the audience. So why don't we go ahead now and kind of like open up the floor to anybody that might want to ask a question to, if you have a question for a specific panelist, you could ask a specific panelist. If you want to ask the question to the group, we can do that as well. And we'll just go through these and see where we get to. Felipe, you want to kick us off?
Sure. So thank you so much, Annette, Katrina, and Duane. That was fantastic to get your insight. So my name is Felipe, and I'm from the Seattle area. What's up? And I have two questions here, but maybe we can start off with the first one. So like, if you guys could do it over again, how would you prepare for your immersive program?
Annette, do you want to go first, or you want me to?
No, go ahead.
I would definitely do all of CSX, but also build more things. I would build projects, build CRUD apps, build it's one thing doing like CSX, or it's one thing doing a tutorial, but you're gonna have to build things anyway at Codesmith without much guidance. So yeah, just build stuff, get frustrated, get lost, but yeah, that is really the only way to like really get prepared.
I like it. Build stuff, get frustrated, get lost. That sounds like every day of my life as a software engineer. Annette, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, definitely agree with that. And I feel like personally for me, I would have been much more of a hard ass on my own, like technical communication skills before I started like interviewing. Because even though I knew that Codesmith was super particular and really placed importance on that, I don't think people realize just how much of it is actually like utilized once you're actually in the program. So kind of getting myself mentally ready to like deal with that, and kind of making sure that every time I speak, it's with the same right like specificity, and I communicate what I need to communicate in that like short amount of time. I would have definitely practiced that a lot more before I did the program.
Katrina, anything on your side?
I feel like technical communication and building things are two of the best things that you really can work on before getting into Codesmith, because a lot of Codesmith projects are kind of like, if you watch like the Great British Baking Show, it's like the technical challenge where you have like a really like limited recipe, and it's like, well, make this fancy thing, and you're like, okay, looks like I have to figure a lot of this out on my own, which is the point, like which is a great way to learn. But having experience building things and hitting those roadblocks and figuring out where to work around them, and also kind of, I would say, building up. I mean, I'm like, what do you call it? I'm a resource queen. I have all my resources. I've got a resource for everything. If you need a link, I have a link. And I think had I kind of spent time organizing and building out my resources going into the program, I would have maybe had a little bit of an easier time. But I think just mentally preparing yourself to kind of to be challenged. Honestly, yeah. If I've had one thing, it's like prepare yourself to not know what's going on. The reigning metaphor is drinking from the fire hose, and that's it. Like that's the way it's going to be. You're not going to get everything, so don't come in being super hard on yourself, expecting to be like, okay, I'm going to understand every word that comes out of this person's mouth, and by the end of this lesson, I'm going to know exactly what I did. Like it's repetition over time that really like builds these ideas. Like eventually you get the baseline and then you can build things on top of them. But if you come into the program thinking that you're just gonna every day you're gonna like be like, yeah, check that off, it's not gonna happen like that. I mean, for some people maybe, but not for me. But yeah. Also, I love Seattle. That's great. That's all. I lived there. It was great.
Awesome. And I know you said you have 2 questions, but I want to make sure we spread the love a little bit. So I promise I'll come back for your second question after we get through the other folks that have their hand up. Sound good, Felipe? Henry, how about you?
Hi, I'm Henry Patterson, and I'm from the New York area. And I would say my question is well, I took another immersive coding boot camp, but that was with another place, and that was online. But I would, and since then it's just been tricky, finding a position after that. But so I would say, and you probably said this earlier, so if I ask again, I'm sorry, but I would say, would you say it was probably, I mean, I'm sure it doesn't really matter that much, but would you say it was maybe easier, finding a job, or compared to the, on-site versus remote, finding a position afterwards, or does it not really matter?
I think what the biggest factor of finding a job is how much effort you put in resumes. I think a lot of people, and I was guilty of this myself, but felt like I wasn't ready, so I didn't really go super intense with the job search. But I think I know people who found jobs 2 months after, and I know people who took longer than that, Now with me, I went the holiday season of 2019, and then the pandemic that kind of impacted it a little bit. But yeah, I think the number one factor is apply, send resumes to jobs that you feel like you're not even qualified for. Still send it. Let them tell you that you're not qualified. Don't try to disqualify yourself.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like now is probably a very interesting time too, especially with the tech industry right now. So it's going to be, I personally am curious just to see how things are the rest of the year going into Q1, Q2. But I mean, Duane is also right that you just have to, obviously be very kind of strategic in terms of how you apply. So making sure that even if the interview doesn't go well, you learn from it, right? So don't feel like just because it was a bad interview and you kind of tripped up on a couple of questions that it was, not worth the time or waste of your energy. No, right? You'll learn through that to kind of narrow down wording to focus on. And the next time you do get asked a similar question, you'll be like, okay, I'm prepared. And the more you do it, the more comfortable you are with kind of honing in on what you want to share with the employer, and also learn to speak a little bit more concretely in what you can offer to the team, and also the projects that you build. Because the production project is going to be a huge selling point for that. And that's kind of what you want to sell as you're going through that interview process.
Right on. Katrina, any thoughts?
I think that one of the things that Codesmith really excels in is preparing you to enter the job market once you finish the program. There is a lot of focus on making sure that your resume is ready and you know how to talk about your resume, you know how to talk about your projects, and you kind of, so that's one half of it. And the other half is just like going into interviews. The only way to get better at interviewing is to have a lot of a lot of them, basically. And so I think that's having that expectation of going into the job market and being like, okay, it's my first interview, it's going to be rough, but then it's going to get easier from here. I don't know, I can't really speak to the in-person versus remote like stats for like hiring, like what percentage of residents find a job within 180 days of completing the program or whatever the statistic is. But I will say that pretty much everyone, pending some like special cases, has found a job for my cohort. And I will say a lot of people, it probably took a couple months. I ended up doing the fellowship. So I think that for me personally, having the opportunity to do fellowship really helped me feel more confident going into my interviewing stage of my life, I guess, which was like pivotal, because that's just, some people have more confidence going in no matter what, and some people don't. And I am the latter. So I think that, just preparing yourself. But I do think that I would be surprised to find that the in-person program had a statistically significant difference in the like percentage of people finding a job after X amount of time, because they do prepare you so well. And a lot of the interviews I did, at least, were not in person until you get to like one of the later stages in the interview process, or not at all ever. So I don't know how much that would necessarily make a difference, but it depends on how you learn, I guess. Yeah.
Yes. Right on.
Great, thank you.
Hi, hello from Darwin, Australia. So I'm really enjoying this and getting a lot out of it. Thank you to everyone. I'm trying to decide between in-person, remote, but also the part-time program, which I know we're not covering today. I'm a really extremely introverted person, and I'm kind of terrified of 12 or 13 hours of interacting with people a day. And I just wonder, is that something that any of you faced? Could you take us through a typical day? So, is it 12 hours of paired discussion, or like what's sort of the tempo of the day? And, as a normal person's stamina, can you deal with this level of work as well as interaction?
Well, yeah, I'm not the most social person myself, but I found it to be a very comfortable environment. I think, the first hour you're doing like an algorithm by yourself, like hack hour, and then the lectures, and then you go off to pairs. So you're not pairing with someone 12 hours a day. But yeah, there's definitely, especially, obviously in person, there's definitely a social, because I think that's the one of the things that drew me to Codesmith was the community aspect. So, but I found that the people there were both my cohort mates and the staff, the instructors, whoever. It was a very, very positive experience. So, and I kind of find I kind of feel like I'm an introvert, but I had no problems communicating with people there.
Yeah, I agree with Duane too, because there are definitely times where you have the opportunity to work on things by yourself. So that kind of, at least temporarily, will kind of get your mind off. Okay, I have to either like be there for somebody all the time. But I feel like it's also one of the good things with Codesmith is that it prepares you to experiencing what it's going to be like when you actually join an engineering team, because the reality is you're actually not going to be working by yourself once you're a part of a company. right? So the ability to communicate well with others and making sure that you're respectful and vice versa. And that's one thing that Codesmith really hones in on, because everybody that you'll never have to feel like, oh, you're either getting, pushed too hard on a personal level, or somebody's like prying into your space. Like, no, we want to make sure that it's a good environment for both of you guys. So if in any case that, you do kind of feel like you want some sort of, adjustment space, like you can always work with people there to make that happen. But I've never personally felt like overwhelmed or anything. And for me, it was good to be in that environment, because you get to learn a lot more things based on the way people approach different problems, and that's a huge benefit versus just kind of doing things by yourself.
Yeah, I think I did the remote program, so that obviously has a little bit more of an isolating element to it, which can be nice when you want to when you want that. But like I said, like I felt like the community was very vibrant and very, very easy to talk to people and all that. However, I am an extroverted introvert, so it's hard for me to not turn like personality on around people, even when I like need to turn it off. And so it can get really fatiguing. I personally, though, like didn't have any extreme like social fatigue. That said, it's long, but the days are like lecture. So you can ask questions during lecture, but you're not like chit-chatting. And so you have like a lecture, and then you like have a thing you have to do, and then you have a lecture, and then you have a thing you have to do. So it's not like 12 hours of like technically communicating with someone and trying to code. Like it's a little bit, I mean, the pace is fast, but the individual days you do have chunked out sections to work on things. And I will say that the team was extremely on top of it when it came to accommodations. I have a friend, and this person has autism, and there were certain days where this person really had a hard time, coming to class and engaging and that kind of thing. And this person was able to talk to the staff and have accommodations made for their needs, which was huge and really, really helped them get through the program. And it really helped accommodate their learning style. So I think if you do have, I'm not necessarily that you have to have like a doctor's note reason to require these accommodations, but if you do need accommodations for your mental health, that is something that is prioritized explicitly throughout the program. And so if you feel like today I can't turn my camera on, I'm having issues, you can send a message, you can keep your camera off, even though the expectation is that you turn your camera on when you're present. Like that's what I was a fellow, and I was there being like, hey, everybody turn your cameras on, please, like being annoying. But I would know who was allowed to have their camera off, and not necessarily, I didn't have to know why if they wanted to keep it private, but I knew like, so there is consideration for different people's social needs, I guess. And I thought that as long as you're willing to kind of advocate for yourself, Codesmith is willing to make space for those needs.
Nice.
Yeah, I do think this is a good consideration for like, if you are considering after the program to do fellowship, like this is an important thing to kind of just personally kind of suss out yourself, because with the fellowship, it's not just doing handling the coursework part of it, but also dealing with managing the residents there. So that's another layer of like the emotional and the mental part of it that's important too. So that should be also taken into consideration if you choose to go that route along with the program.
Nice, right on. Well, we had one other question, but it went down, and I think we're running out of time. But I do have one last question that I would like to pose to our three panelists to kind of just sum up, your experience, if we don't mind. I'd love to know if we could turn back time and go back to when you were applying for the program. If you had, knowing everything that you know now, if you had the option to go in person or remote, what would you do now? Annette, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I think I would still do in person just because of my learning style. But I will say it will be nice to also like bake in a little bit of that flexibility that comes along with being remote too. Because now that I've worked from home for so long, it's like, oh, it's so nice just to go to the gym during the day and not have to like worry about where I have to be in this moment. So, but all in all, I feel like onsite would still be a good fit for me, at least.
Nice. Katrina, how about you?
Yeah, I think it's a tough question. I'd still have to drive there. No, but I think it would have been a lot of fun to get to engage with the other residents in person, and I do think I would have had to like weigh my options, and especially because one of my influences for doing this program was that my cousin had done the in-person Los Angeles program, and I very much followed her footsteps. She was a fellow, so I was like, I'm gonna try fellowship, and so I think I have a hard time saying what I would have chosen had I the choice when I was accepted to Codesmith. Given the influences around me at the time, I might have been inclined to do in person. However, know thyself, working from home really works. It was really nice. Like it's so intense to begin with, and I know what my personality type is, and I know the kind of fatigue that I can experience from like having to go to a place and just be physically social, I guess. So I think I probably would have continued down the remote road but now I know that how well it suits me. I don't know if going into it, I would have known that and made the same decision, but knowing what I know now, I probably would do the remote program because it really did just work really well for me. And I didn't feel as though I was being squandered out of something. I feel like I got everything I paid for and then some and then some.
Awesome. Duane, what about you, man?
Yeah, I would definitely do the in-person. Just being around, my current mates, community, less distractions, like I'm fully immersed and surrounded in this program that, it helps me focus more. So, and I think it builds a better bond with, your production project, y'all could go out for coffee or whatever, ping pong or whatever have you. So yeah, I'll definitely do the in-person again.
Nice. Right on. Well, let's everybody unmute if you would, and let's just give a huge round of applause for our panelists for coming in and kind of answering questions this evening. It's exciting for me to see how all of you have come along throughout this time, and it's interesting to see the kind of differing opinions. Right? It seems like the folks that did it in person had a great experience and would still do it in person, and the folks that did it remotely, it worked well for them, right? So I guess it's really kind of up to you. But big shout out to y'all. Thanks everybody.